Imagine that thousands of discoveries that could change the world were never published. They were erased, rejected, silenced, not because they were wrong, but because they were too inconvenient. Who decides what is true? Why does science increasingly serve the interests of corporations rather than the search for truth? This investigation reveals the facts that are hidden under the label of unacceptable. It is a story about how the truth is locked away. When Dr. Elaine Mackey completed her research on the effects of rare earth metals on the human endocrine system in the early 2000s, she was confident that her work would cause a sensation. It was a detailed, carefully calibrated experiment involving dozens of test subjects, with impeccable methodology and conclusions that could have influenced the environmental policies of several countries. But no major scientific journal would publish her article. The responses from editors were almost identical. Not relevant to the scientific agenda. Inconclusive results. High likelihood of public controversy. Elaine couldn't believe that science, a field where truth is supposed to be paramount, had become a battleground for ideological and political filters. Mackey's story is no exception. It is just one of thousands of similar stories, quietly lost in laboratory archives and personal correspondence between scientists. Research that does not fit into the accepted worldview often does not even reach reviewers. This is called the invisible wall, a system of rejection and silent taboos that filters scientific information before it even reaches colleagues. There is a persistent myth that science is objective, neutral, and free. But the reality is that scientific journals are gatekeepers who decide who gets to be heard. Publication in a prestigious journal can secure a career, access to grants and reputation. Rejection means the death of an idea, no matter how revolutionary it may be. And when the filter is determined not only by scientific criteria, but also by ideology, economic interests, and reputational risks, we are dealing with censorship. Censorship in science is nothing new. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church banned works that did not conform to dogma. During the Enlightenment, ideological restrictions were replaced by political ones. In Soviet Russia, scientists were sent to camps for bourgeois genetics, or pseudoscience. But modern times have brought a more sophisticated method of suppression: administrative and editorial. Today, censorship does not punish, it ignores. Articles are not banned. They simply do not pass review. The blow is not direct, but comes through mechanisms that damage reputations. A young scientist who submits an article on an unpopular topic risks their career. Funding will be withdrawn, positions in research centers will be closed, and their name will end up on an unofficial blacklist, silently passed between editorial offices. Research on the following topics is particularly harshly censored: alternative approaches to medicine, new physical models that contradict standard theory, the environmental impact of industrial technologies, the influence of digital technologies on neuropsychology. Each of these topics touches on the interests of powerful players: pharmaceutical companies, IT giants, energy corporations, and it is through scientific journals that the agenda is adjusted. Of course, some of the deviations are entirely justified. Science requires quality, repeatability, and statistical reliability. But the problem lies elsewhere. Even research that is ideal from a scientific point of view can be rejected if it is dangerous to the system. This is especially true if the author is a lone wolf who is not part of the circle of recognized experts. The mechanism is very simple. Each journal has an editorial board consisting of scientists and administrators. These people determine which topics are priority. This means that anything that does not fit into the paradigm is excluded. This could be a study showing the uselessness of a widely used therapy, or an article that questions the basis of the cosmological model, or, as in the case of Elaine McKee, work that could provoke an international scandal if proven. We live in an age where the suppression of knowledge has become delicate and elegant. Scientific truth is no longer absolute. It has become a commodity, filtered through the sieve of political correctness, marketing, and fear for one's career. This means that behind the facade of free science lies a real wall. A wall behind which the voices of those who dare to ask uncomfortable questions are drowned out. In the mid-19th century, the scientific community was largely open. Scientists published their work in specialized communities, corresponded directly with each other, and debated publicly. But with the growth of research, the emergence of grants, and the influence of universities, a filtering system became necessary. This led to the emergence of scientific journals and the institution of peer review. Initially, this was a way to maintain quality, but gradually, this mechanism turned into a form of power. Quiet, but pervasive. Editors of scientific journals are figures who are invisible to the general public. Their names are rarely mentioned in the media, but they are the ones who decide which ideas will enter the information bloodstream of science and which will be purged like errors. These people have almost absolute power over the information space of science. No reviewer will get a job without the consent of the editorial board. No article will be published if it does not fit the tone of the publication. The paradox is that editors are not always experts in the topics they review. They are often scientific administrators or former researchers who have long since left the world of experimentation. Their decisions may be based not so much on the methodology of the article as on personal views, the current situation, ratings, and, of course, pressure from sponsors. The internal guidelines of many scientific journals strictly prohibit disclosure of the reasons for rejection. The wording is impersonal, does not correspond to the current theme of the journal, requires significant revision, of little interest to readers. This creates ideal conditions for manipulation. The author does not know why their work has been rejected and cannot appeal. Moreover, the practice of blind review protects not so much objectivity as impunity. Reviewers can reject work because of personal animosity, competition, or ideological differences. There have been cases where reviewers have stolen ideas, reworked them, and published them under their own names. And all this within the framework of the official procedure. Particular attention should be paid to so-called high-impact journals. These are publications with maximum influence in the academic community. Publication in them is a ticket to the big world of science. But the requirements are different there. The topic must fit into the current trend, be digestible for the mass media, and not contradict political or commercial interests. This means that the paradigm is set not by open data, but by the interests of those behind the editorial board. A natural question arises: who are these people, and how do they gain power? Most often, it is through old academic connections, clans, and university committees. Selected reviewers become permanent experts, then members of editorial boards. The process is closed. Outsiders can hardly get in. It resembles a closed lodge where decisions are made behind closed doors and passed down from generation to generation. This is precisely why it is so difficult to promote new scientific paradigms. When Thomas Kuhn wrote about the structure of scientific revolutions, he described how new knowledge passes through resistance, ridicule, and ignorance. This resistance is not abstract. It is organized, and behind it stands the power of editors. There is even a term for this in the scientific community: gatekeeping. This is precisely the function that editors perform. They guard the existing order, and if a study, no matter how brilliant, could undermine that order, it will not be allowed to pass. There will be references to poor sampling, insufficient representativeness, or simply insufficient interest for the audience. A case in point is Gerald Pollack, a biophysicist who proposed a fourth phase of water. His discoveries could have overturned the foundations of biochemistry, but most journals refused to publish his articles. It was only years later that he found private funds and platforms to disseminate his ideas. Today, his work is gaining support, but only thanks to his persistence and circumvention of official channels. When truth depends on the will of a few, it is no longer science, but a filtering system. Editors become priests who distribute access to sacred knowledge. They do not impose outright bans. They simply do not open the door. And therein lies their power. And therein lies the main threat to freedom of thought. There is an unspoken rule among young researchers: publish or perish. This formula, which first appeared in the English-speaking academic community as publish or perish, has long since become a harsh reality for scientists around the world. Publishing in scientific journals has become not just a way to share knowledge, but the main criterion for career advancement, obtaining grants, and maintaining status. But what happens when the publication system itself is distorted? At the heart of academic science lies meritocracy, the idea that the best ideas and research are recognized. But in reality, today's publication system works like a bureaucratic machine, where discoveries are not important, but rather quantity and conformity to the mainstream. This leads to a real devaluation of science. Articles are cloned, topics are chosen not for their importance but for their publishability, and original ideas are lost in a flood of similar works. Young scientists who dream of recognition are forced to play by the rules. They write what journals accept rather than what is really important. They repeat what has already been researched, adding minimal differences to earn publication points. This race leads to the degeneration of science. Novelty is replaced by form, meaning by quotability. A separate phenomenon is the so-called journal farms and paid publications. Some publishers have turned publishing into a business. If you want to be printed, pay up. This is especially damaging for researchers from countries with limited funding. They are forced to look for cheap journals that lack real peer review. As a result, science is filled with texts of dubious quality, and real discoveries are lost in the noise. But even prestigious journals are susceptible to bias. Studies show that most editors prefer articles with positive results because they are more interesting. Papers where the hypothesis is not confirmed are often not published at all. This creates a publication bubble effect. Science seems to constantly confirm its own assumptions, while numerous refutations remain behind the scenes. Breakthrough, interdisciplinary ideas suffer particularly badly. They do not fit into the narrow framework of journals and are therefore considered risky. And editors do not like risk. After all, a mistake is a blow to one's reputation. This is how self-censorship works. The best is the enemy of the stable. The new is a threat to the existing order. In addition, authors are under pressure from universities, foundations, and even colleagues. The academic environment is often dominated by competition that turns into hostility. If you don't publish, you are a dead scientist. If you publish in the wrong journals, you are a marginal. If you raise uncomfortable topics, you are dangerous. As a result, scientists begin to work not for the truth, but for KPIs, quantitative performance indicators introduced on the model of business. Closed circles are formed. Those who publish receive grants. Those who receive grants publish. The rest are kicked out of the system. This is not just selection. It is a system of squeezing people out. And even if you have a brilliant idea but are outside the flow, no one will hear it. It is symbolic that in modern science, there is no institution for the public defense of ideas. There is no place where you can present a hypothesis and be heard without formal filters. Even conferences work on the same principle. Abstracts are submitted, filtered, and selected. And in this lies the collapse of freedom of scientific thought. Science, as a territory of experimentation and debate, is turning into a reporting system. Whoever is cited more has a higher impact factor, or is closer to the trend is right. The rest remain silent. And this silence, supported by publication terror, threatens the very existence of progress. More and more scientists are turning to alternative platforms, preprints, independent websites, video formats. But even there, they face marginalization, lack of recognition, and blocking. The bulk of science remains locked in the glass dome of journals, where only insiders are allowed. Publish or perish. This is not just a slogan. It is a death sentence for many brilliant minds. And if we do not rethink the system itself, tomorrow science will become not a search for truth, but a factory for producing texts. Beautiful, formal, and completely meaningless. In the 20th century, the line between academic science and business began to blur rapidly. Research became not just a means of knowledge, but an investment. Companies began to sponsor laboratories, pay for research, and finance publications. It seemed like a mutually beneficial alliance. Science gets money, business gets innovation. But in practice, things turned out differently. Money became a lever of control, and scientific journals became gateways through which only convenient discoveries are allowed to pass. Corporations, especially pharmaceutical, agrochemical, energy, and IT giants, have learned to use scientific infrastructure to shape a worldview that is beneficial to them. They sponsor research, hold conferences, and own shares in publishing houses. Most importantly, they can influence journal policy. When research contradicts corporate interests, it has almost no chance of being published. This is especially true when it comes to product safety, health impacts, or ecosystem destruction. The journal simply does not accept the article. Sometimes the author is directly asked to withdraw their work. Sometimes it is simply ignored. And sometimes a smear campaign is organized to show that the research is poor quality or unethical. One well-known example is the story of glyphosate, a substance widely used in herbicides. Several independent studies have shown that it may be carcinogenic, but publications were blocked and authors were pressured. It was only after high-profile court cases and the publication of internal corporate correspondence that the extent of the censorship became clear. And this is not an isolated case. Scientists working for corporations often sign contracts stating that the company has the right to edit or prohibit the publication of results. Under such conditions, it is impossible to talk about independence. Science is turning into a PR department for big business. Journals closely linked to industry play a special role. Many of them receive sponsorship, place advertisements, and sometimes are directly owned by commercial entities. Such publications develop a hidden but strict editorial line. Research confirming the effectiveness of the sponsor's products is accepted. Critical materials are ignored. In addition, there is so-called grant blackmail. A scientist who receives funding from a company must show positive results. Otherwise, they will not receive the next grant. This creates a vicious system. In order to survive, researchers are forced to adapt, adjust their conclusions, and avoid controversial topics. Journals, in turn, publish only safe materials. Censorship can also be indirect, for example, through fear of lawsuits. If a journal publishes an article criticizing a product, the corporation can sue. Even if the case is lost, the legal costs can ruin the publication. Therefore, editors prefer not to take risks. This is called preventive self-censorship. As a result, the scientific picture of the world is formed not according to the principle of truth, but according to a model of acceptability. What is profitable gets published. What is inconvenient disappears. This creates a distorted perception of reality. It seems that products are safe, technologies are reliable, and climate change is exaggerated. But behind this lie billions of dollars and a network of influence that encompasses universities, laboratories, and publishing houses. Interestingly, even regulatory bodies often rely on the same publications. If an article has not appeared in a recognized journal, it does not exist. This means there is no problem. This means that production, marketing, and implementation can continue. It is a vicious circle. Corporations control publications, publications determine standards, and standards protect the interests of corporations. There is also a flip side: commissioned research. When you need to prove that a product is effective, loyal researchers are found who will select the sample, statistics, and methodology. Such articles are quickly published, cited, and used in advertising. Real independent experiments remain on the shelf. A telling example is the sugar industry. In the mid-20th century, scientists sponsored by the Sugar Association published articles blaming fats for cardiovascular disease. At the same time, data on the dangers of sugar was concealed. These publications shaped the views of doctors, the media, and the public for decades. And only recently has it become known how deeply corporate lies were embedded. There are many such stories, but most will never come to light because they will not be allowed through the editorial doors. This means that we live in a world where the truth is what is approved by business, and where silence is not a mistake, but a strategy. A profitable, well thought out, and systematic one. The internet has taught us to think that nothing can be hidden forever, that every fact, if it exists, will sooner or later come to light. But reality is different. In science, there are discoveries that no one will ever know about, not because they are false, but because they were removed before they ever saw the light of day. They disappear in drafts, in emails, in rejected reviews, in weary decisions to give up the fight. These are not burnt manuscripts, they are erased realities. This is how preliminary censorship works, the most dangerous and invisible kind. It begins the moment a scientist formulates a hypothesis. If it is too dangerous, colleagues dissuade them. Management does not allocate resources. Colleagues whisper, "It will damage the department's reputation." The research does not even begin. If the experiment does take place, the battle for publication begins. But if the conclusions are inconvenient, a series of rejections begins. After a few months, the author gives up. They move the file to the drafts folder and never return to it. This is how a huge number of potentially revolutionary discoveries are lost, and all without a formal ban. Some scientists try to see it through to the end. They post their work on preprint servers, blogs, and YouTube. But without peer review, it is not scientific. The system is structured in such a way that truth without institutional approval is dead. And any data that contradicts the consensus is automatically equated with pseudoscience. History knows dozens of examples of such suppressed discoveries. In the 1970s, a group of biologists from Czechoslovakia discovered unusual reactions of plants to electromagnetic fields. They suggested the existence of a plant nervous system. But the article was not accepted by any international journal. Within the country, too, they refused to print it. The research disappeared. Another case is an alternative model of the structure of the nucleus proposed by a Russian physicist in the 2000s. It explained a number of anomalies that did not fit into the standard model. Despite its mathematical rigor and confirmed calculations, all major journals refused to publish it. The correspondence stated explicitly, "We do not want to set a precedent." Scientific servers and platforms have also become filtering tools. Algorithms prioritize articles with high citation rates and safe topics. Materials that go against the mainstream receive minimal views and quickly disappear from search results. This is a digital form of suppression, not through prohibition, but through invisibility. The issue of suppression is particularly sensitive in the applied sciences, energy, biomedicine, alternative technology. If a discovery could undermine the position of existing technologies, it is destroyed, sometimes gently, sometimes harshly. There is evidence of laboratory break-ins, data leaks, and fake expert reports. There are also rumors that some discoveries are bought. The author's rights are bought out, promises of support and funding are made, and then the project is shelved. This is how dozens of projects related to alternative energy sources, new diagnostic methods, and non-invasive treatments have disappeared. Anything that could reduce the profits of the giants is under threat. What is frightening is that this system operates silently. There are no arrests, no censors in uniform. It is built into the culture of the scientific community, into fear, into a reluctance to go against the tide, and into exhaustion from a fight that cannot be won. Because if you are not cited, you do not exist. Some scientists are creating parallel structures, underground journals, independent conferences, data-sharing networks. But without the support of the media, universities, and regulators, they remain in the shadows. Their ideas do not reach engineers, doctors, or teachers. They exist, but they change nothing. Remote discoveries are not just lost knowledge. They are missed opportunities. They are years that could have saved lives, reduced suffering, changed the economy. They are the price of fear and the price of silence. If the truth is not protected by the system, it disappears. It can be erased not only by dictators or fanatics. It can be erased by scientists with their own hands because they decided it wasn't worth it, that it would be too difficult or too dangerous, and then we are left with what has passed through the filter, with a convenient truth, not with the full picture of the world. In every generation, there are researchers whose ideas are ahead of their time. They question dogmas, offer new visions, break molds. But instead of recognition, they are met with ridicule, isolation, and oblivion. They are called marginalized, amateurs, pseudoscientists. Sometimes they are simply called crazy, and almost always they are excluded from the academic community. This is how the phenomenon of the scientific outcast is born. A scientific outcast is not someone who has made a mistake. It is someone who has gone beyond what is permitted. It is not a question of facts, but of context. If you say something that the system is not ready to hear, you are pushed out. At first, it is subtle. An article is not accepted. Colleagues stop saying hello. Conferences are closed. Then it gets tougher. Dismissal, withdrawal of grants, public accusations. History has seen many such cases. Nikola Tesla, who was called crazy for his ideas about wireless energy, Immanuel Velikovsky, who dared to rewrite history to include cosmic catastrophes, Rupert Sheldrake, who proposed the morphic field hypothesis. Each of them faced fierce resistance, not because their ideas were refuted, but because they did not fit into the accepted picture of the world. In modern times, exile has become more sophisticated. Scientists are not burned at the stake or arrested. They are simply ignored. Their names disappear from citation indexes. Their articles disappear from libraries. Their lectures disappear from programs. Their mentions disappear from Wikipedia. This is digital exile, and it is no less destructive. Young and independent researchers are particularly vulnerable. They have no institutional support, no grants, no defenders. They may be brilliant, but the system will not accept them. And without the system, there is no status. Without status, there is no authority. Without authority, there are no listeners. Paradoxically, the truth can go unnoticed simply because it came from the wrong person. There are closed blacklists, unofficial but effective. Journals pass on information about problematic authors to each other. Universities avoid connections with those who are associated with pseudoscience. Often, any research that breaks out of the paradigm ends up with this label. This is a self-defense mechanism of the system, and at the same time, it is a way to intimidate others. There is also a psychological aspect. Science is a social structure. Recognition is important to scientists. When a person finds themselves isolated, they lose confidence. They begin to doubt themselves, withdraw, and abandon their ideas. This destroys lives. Some leave science. Some become depressed. Some go mad. Only a few continue the struggle, despite everything. Sometimes an idea finds recognition decades later. Then the outcast is proclaimed a visionary. He is returned to the textbooks, and theories are named after him. But more often than not, it is too late. He is already dead. Or he has disappeared. Or he has become someone who is quoted but not mentioned. Because the system does not know how to apologize. It only knows how to erase. The irony is that science itself is built on doubt, on the right to ask questions. But when the question touches on fundamentals, the reaction is similar to that of religion. Anger, rejection, exile. It resembles the Church's struggle against heretics. Only instead of inquisitors, there are editors. Instead of dogmas, there are paradigms. Instead of a bonfire, there is silence. Some outcasts find refuge in alternative circles. They create websites, write books, and communicate with like-minded people. But this is a ghetto. They are criticized, ridiculed, and blocked. Yet among them may be those who have found the path to new knowledge. It's just that it doesn't follow the approved roadmap. Their biographies are instructive. They show that science is not always a territory of truth. Sometimes it is a territory of fear. Sometimes it is a territory of pride. Sometimes it is a territory of bureaucracy. And if we want truly open knowledge, we must defend the right to be uncomfortable, to be strange, to be the first. The question is not whether there are discoveries in science that can change humanity. The question is whether they will reach us or remain locked away. The last few decades have proven that knowledge is a resource, and access to it is regulated. And the more radical the idea, the higher the chance that it will be put on hold. For later. For when it's safe. Or even forever. The future has long been held hostage by the present. Research that could lead to a quantum leap in energy, medicine, and transport is regularly rejected, silenced, or discredited. It's a paradox. We live in an age of unprecedented technological power, but the pace of radical discoveries has almost come to a halt. Why? Because the system is afraid of change. Platforms, institutions, and corporations are built on stability. Every breakthrough is a risk, not only for business, but also for the scientific hierarchy. A new theory is a threat to textbooks. A new method is a challenge to patents. A new source of energy is a blow to global economic structures. And that is why even the most promising discoveries are often labeled unproven, speculative, or insufficiently substantiated. Even fantastically successful experiments can be stopped. The archives of independent research groups contain findings that could change our understanding of gravity, neurophysiology, and the structure of matter. But these works will not pass the filter. Not because they are wrong, but because they are too unusual. The problem of access is particularly acute. Hundreds of millions of articles are still behind paywalls. Scientists from poor countries cannot read them. Independent researchers even less so. This means that knowledge has become feudal property. It is controlled by publishers. Access is bought, and truth becomes a commodity. At the same time, official science is increasingly turning into a show. Popular articles are written to fit the media agenda. Press releases are written before the article is published. Reports are submitted before the data is analyzed. Everything is subordinated not to the search for knowledge, but to the production of content. And real discoveries quietly disappear into the archives, waiting for their moment. Or they never do. We are losing our alternatives. When only one view of the world is considered scientific, everything else is nullified. No parallel theories, no new systems of thought. But it was precisely these that once gave us quantum mechanics, the theory of relativity, genetics. All these ideas were initially considered crazy, and now they have become the foundation of the world. But what if the new foundations already exist? What if, among the rejected ideas, there is the very formula that can stop disease, replace hydrocarbons, unlock the secrets of the brain? And what if we don't see them because the editor said no? The future needs freedom. The freedom to make mistakes. The freedom to search, even if no one believes. A system where substance matters more than form. Where publication is not a reward, but a starting point for discussion. Where truth is not filtered for convenience. Censorship in science is not just a deterrent. It is a mechanism for stealing the future. It works invisibly. It quietly removes what is too early. But then, it may turn out to be too late. If we want to see the future, we must be prepared to hear those who are not visible, to accept ideas that frighten us, to give a voice to those who are not listened to. Because the truth does not always follow the main road. Sometimes it makes its way along the edge, through closed journals, through exile, through silence. But it keeps coming. And either we meet it, or we miss it. And then we will remain in a world where science serves not as a light, but as a filter, where truth is locked away, and the key is held by those who are afraid to open it.